The dining room was bathed in the warm glow of the chandelier, the clink of wine glasses and soft laughter filling the air as my parents raised a toast. To Mason, my father said, his voice booming with pride, the new CEO of Caldwell Construction. The room erupted in applause, forks tapping against plates, cousins grinning, and my mother beaming as she squeezed my brother's shoulder. I sat frozen, my glass half raised, the smile I'd plastered on my face threatening to crack. 30 years of my life, nights spent poring over blueprints, weekends managing crews, every ounce of my energy poured into the family business, and they'd chosen him. Mason, who'd spent the last decade backpacking through Europe, chasing dreams that never materialized, while I held the company together. My name is Lauren Caldwell, and in that moment, surrounded by the family I'd sacrificed everything for, I realized they'd never seen me at all. But I wasn't going to let them erase me. Not without a fight. Before that night, my life was a vibrant tapestry woven with threads of purpose, pride, and unwavering dedication. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a sprawling suburban house with a wraparound porch, where the scent of my mother's jasmine garden drifted through open windows each summer. The house was a haven, its oak floors polished to a gleam, family photos lining the mantel, snapshots of my childhood, my brother Mason's gap-toothed grin, and my grandfather's weathered hands holding a blueprint. Caldwell Construction wasn't just a business, it was our legacy, founded by my grandfather in the 1950s, a man whose calloused fingers and quiet wisdom had turned a small carpentry shop into a regional powerhouse. As a child, I'd follow my dad to job sites, my sneakers kicking up sawdust as he sketched designs on napkins, his pencil moving with a precision I envied. "You've got a sharp eye, Lauren," he'd say, ruffling my hair, his voice warm with pride. Those moments were my foundation, the spark that drove me to make the company my life's work. High school was a blur of ambition. While my friends planned beach trips, I interned at Caldwell Construction, filing permits, learning the rhythm of contracts, and absorbing the chaos of construction sites, the hum of saws, the sharp tang of fresh lumber, the camaraderie of workers shouting over blueprints. I loved it all, the way each project was a puzzle, each building a story etched in steel and concrete. College at UNC was a means to an end, business administration, where I graduated with honors, my nights spent studying while classmates partied. My professor, Dr. Ellis, a stern woman with a knack for spotting potential, pulled me aside after class one day. "You're not just book smart, Lauren," she said, her eyes piercing. "You've got grit. Don't let anyone dim that." Her words stayed with me, a quiet fuel as I returned to Raleigh, ready to pour myself into the family legacy. At 25, I took over project management at Caldwell Construction, stepping into a role that felt like destiny. I streamlined operations, cutting costs by renegotiating supplier contracts and implementing software that tracked budgets in real time. My first major win was a $5 million contract for a community center, a project I'd pitched to the city council with a trembling voice but unyielding conviction. The deal doubled our revenue, and I became the company's backbone, waking at dawn to review blueprints over coffee, my kitchen table a chaotic spread of mugs, pens, and architectural plans. Evenings were spent in client meetings or on job sites, reassuring developers or calming frustrated crews under the glow of floodlights. I thrived on the pressure, the satisfaction of seeing a project rise from dirt to skyline, each beam a testament to my work. My parents relied on me, their trust a badge I wore with pride. Dad called me his right hand, his voice gruff but warm as we reviewed plans in his cluttered office. Mom bragged about my work ethic at her book club, her friends nodding over glasses of Chardonnay. "Lauren's our rock," she'd say, and I'd beam, believing I was building towards something greater, the day I'd lead Caldwell Construction, carrying my grandfather's legacy into a new era. I sacrificed everything for it, vacations I never took, relationships that fizzled under the weight of my schedule, sleep lost to late-night emails. I missed my best friend's wedding in Charleston, canceled a hiking trip to Asheville, and let promising dates fade into unanswered texts, all because the company came first. I believed in the legacy, in my place at its heart. I believed my parents saw me, too. Mason, my younger brother, was a different story. Charming, carefree, with a smile that could disarm anyone, he was the golden child who never had to try. After high school, he left for Europe, his backpack slung over one shoulder, promising to be back soon. Soon stretched into a decade. He sent postcards from Amsterdam, Prague, or Lisbon, each one scrawled with tales of music festivals or cliff-diving adventures. Living the dream, he'd write, and I'd smile, picturing him laughing under foreign skies. He'd call occasionally, his voice crackling over spotty connections, asking for money to fund his latest whim, a surf camp in Portugal, a photography course in Barcelona. My parents always sent it, their voices soft with indulgence. "He's finding himself," Mom would say, her eyes misty, as if I hadn't found myself in the grind of keeping the business afloat. Dad would nod, his silence a quiet endorsement of Mason's freedom. I didn't resent Mason then. I loved him, his easy laugh and the way he'd tease me about my serious face during our rare video calls from some hostel cafe. When he'd visit for Christmas, he'd regale us with stories of Moroccan markets or Icelandic hot springs, and I'd listen, enchanted by his wanderlust. I thought he'd come back eventually, settle down, maybe take a small role in the company, marketing, perhaps, where his charisma could shine. I never imagined he'd claim what I'd built, stepping into a role he hadn't earned, while I was left to watch from the sidelines. The signs of betrayal crept in slowly, like cracks in a foundation you don't notice until the walls begin to tilt. They started a year ago, when Mason returned to Raleigh, his backpack worn but his grin as disarming as ever. It was a Sunday dinner at my parents' house, the dining room warm with the scent of roast and rosemary, the table set with Mom's heirloom china. "I'm done wandering," Mason announced, his fork spearing a slice of beef, his voice casual but firm. "I'm ready to come home." My parents lit up, their faces glowing as if he'd never left. Dad clapped him on the shoulder, Mom's eyes sparkled with tears, and I felt a rush of relief. My brother was back, the family whole again. I hugged him, his familiar scent of cedar and leather grounding me, and for a moment, everything felt right. But then the shifts began, subtle at first, like a melody-changing key. Dad started inviting Mason to job sites, showing him blueprints I'd drafted, explaining processes I'd spent years perfecting. "Just getting him up to speed," Dad said when I raised an eyebrow, his tone dismissive. I nodded, assuming it was temporary, a way to ease Mason into a minor role. But the invitations multiplied, client dinners, board meetings, even a golf outing with our biggest investor, Mr. Callahan, a gruff man who'd always trusted my judgment. Mason charmed them all, his stories of European escapades, wine tastings in Tuscany, hiking the Alps, masking his lack of experience. At one dinner, a sleek steakhouse with dim lighting and leather booths, he held court, his laughter drawing smiles from clients I'd spent years cultivating. I caught him glancing at me, his smile apologetic, as if to say, "I'm just along for the ride." But there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of ambition I didn't recognize. Mom's praise for me grew quieter, her usual boasts about my work ethic replaced by effusive stories of Mason's potential. One evening, as we sipped tea in her sunroom, the air heavy with jasmine, she gushed about his ideas. "Mason thinks we should rebrand," she said, her voice bright. "He's got a vision, Lauren. He's so creative." I nodded, my jaw tight, the sting of being sidelined sharp in my chest. "Creative," I echoed, thinking of the marketing plan I'd spent months refining, the one she'd barely glanced at. Dad was no better, his conversations now revolving around Mason's fresh perspective. At a family barbecue, as cousins tossed a frisbee and aunts chatted over lemonade, he pulled Mason aside to discuss a new office design, ignoring the plans I'd submitted the week before. My cousin Sarah, always perceptive, noticed my silence. "They're acting like Mason's the second coming," she whispered, her brow furrowed. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "It's fine. They'll see my work eventually." But doubt was creeping in, a quiet whisper I couldn't silence. The signs grew bolder. Mason started attending strategic meetings, sitting at the conference table where I'd once led discussions, his presence a jarring note in a room I'd commanded. He'd pitch ideas, flashy ad campaigns, partnerships with trendy startups, that showed he didn't understand budgets or timelines. Yet my parents nodded, their eyes bright with pride, as if his ignorance was innovation. Employees began whispering, their loyalty to me strained by the sudden shift. Javier, my lead engineer, pulled me aside one day, his voice low. "Lauren, what's going on? Mason's talking about cutting our best suppliers. He doesn't know what he's doing." I reassured him, but my confidence was waning. I'd spent years building trust, only to watch it erode under Mason's unearned influence. I told myself it was temporary, that my parents would see reason, that my decade of work couldn't be overshadowed by a prodigal son's charm. I was wrong. The dinner where they announced Mason as CEO was a public execution of everything I'd built. I'd been summoned to the family home under the pretense of a celebration, my heart light with anticipation. I'd assumed it was for the $12 million contract I'd secured with Harper Development, a deal that had taken months of late nights, endless revisions, and tense negotiations with their CEO, Ellen Harper. I'd worn my best dress, a navy sheath that hugged my frame like armor, and brought a bottle of Dad's favorite Merlot, its label gleaming under the chandelier. The dining room was a spectacle, long tables set with crystal and linen, aunts and uncles laughing, cousins snapping photos, even a few longtime employees like Javier toasting with iced tea. I thought it was my moment, the night they'd finally acknowledge my work, maybe even name me CEO, the role I'd earned through sweat and sacrifice. When Dad raised his glass to Mason, the words hit like a sledgehammer. "He's the future of Caldwell Construction," he said, his voice thick with pride, as Mom nodded, her pearl necklace glinting in the light. Mason stood, his grin sheepish but triumphant, his navy blazer crisp against the white tablecloth. "I'm honored," he said, his voice smooth, "and I'll make you all proud." The room erupted, forks tapping plates, cousins cheering, aunts dabbing their eyes. No one mentioned me. Not the $12 million contract, not the years of 80-hour weeks, not even my name. I sat frozen, my glass half raised, the Merlot bitter on my tongue. My chest burned, a mix of rage and grief threatening to spill over. Sarah leaned over, her voice a whisper. "Lauren, this is wrong. You okay?" I forced a smile, my lips trembling. "I'm fine." But I wasn't. The room felt like it was shrinking, the laughter and clinking glasses a cruel mockery of my sacrifice. I excused myself to the kitchen, the familiar scent of rosemary and garlic now cloying. I splashed cold water on my face, my hands gripping the sink as I stared at my reflection in the window. My eyes were glassy, my jaw tight, but I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not now. I thought of every moment I'd given to the company, the missed birthdays, the friendships I'd let fade, the dreams I'd shelved for their legacy. I'd poured my soul into Caldwell Construction, believing it was mine to carry forward. And they'd handed it to Mason, who'd never read a contract, never balanced a budget, never spent a day in the office. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a theft of my identity, my purpose, my future. I dried my face with a dish towel, my resolve hardening. They'd made their choice. Now I'd make mine. The drive home was a haze, the Raleigh skyline blurring into streaks of gold and blue as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I wanted to scream, to call my parents and demand answers, to confront Mason and ask how he could accept a role he hadn't earned. The hurt was raw, a wound that pulsed with every heartbeat, but anger wasn't enough. I'd spent my life proving myself through action, not words. If they thought they could erase me, they were about to learn how wrong they were. I pulled into the driveway of my small craftsman bungalow, its porch light casting a warm glow over the hydrangeas I'd planted last spring. The quiet of my home was a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I sat at my kitchen table, the wood scarred from years of late-night work, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dark, a blank canvas for the fight I was about to wage. I wasn't going to beg for what was mine. I was going to take it back, and I'd do it my way. The next morning, I woke with a clarity that cut through the fog of betrayal. The pain lingered, a dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination. I brewed a pot of coffee, the rich aroma grounding me as I set up my war room. My kitchen table became a battlefield, covered with notebooks, highlighters, and stacks of printed emails. For years, I'd been the linchpin of Caldwell Construction, managing contracts, nurturing client relationships, and building systems that kept the company afloat. I knew every detail, the quirks of our suppliers, the preferences of our clients, the financial margins that kept us profitable. And I'd kept meticulous records, not out of paranoia, but because precision was my nature. Those records were my weapon now. I started with the client list, my eyes scanning names I'd spent years cultivating. The $12 million contract with Harper Development was my crowning achievement, secured through months of negotiations with Ellen Harper, a CEO I'd met at a women's business conference 2 years ago. We'd bonded over shared stories of breaking into construction, a field dominated by men who underestimated us. Ellen had chosen Caldwell because of me, my vision, my reliability, my ability to deliver. I pulled up the contract, my fingers tracing the fine print. There it was, a clause I'd insisted on, requiring my personal oversight for the project's duration. It was a small detail, one my parents had signed without a second thought, distracted by their own agendas. But it was my leverage, a lifeline I hadn't known I'd need. I spent the day digging deeper, cross-referencing project logs, financial reports, and email threads. I found patterns, clients who'd signed because of my reputation, suppliers who trusted me over my father's impulsive demands, employees who looked to me for leadership. Caldwell Construction wasn't just a family business, it was my creation, built on my expertise and grit. Mason might have the title, but I held the keys. I reviewed old emails from Ellen, her words praising my unmatched professionalism. I found notes from Javier, thanking me for mentoring him through his first project. Each document was a brick in the case I was building, not just against my family, but for myself. By evening, my table was a mosaic of evidence, my notebook filled with a plan that was both a rebellion and a rebirth. I wasn't just leaving. I was rewriting the story they thought they'd written for me. The internal struggle came in waves, each one testing my resolve. Part of me wanted to confront my parents, to storm into their office and lay out every sacrifice, the 80-hour weeks, the missed weddings, the dreams I'd buried for their company. I imagined their faces, Dad's stern frown softening, Mom's eyes welling with regret, as they realized what they'd done. But confrontation was a trap. They'd apologize, offer me a meaningless title, maybe beg me to stay and support Mason. It would change nothing. Another part of me wanted to run, to leave Raleigh and start over in a city where their betrayal couldn't touch me, Portland, maybe, or Austin, where the construction industry was booming. But that felt like surrender, a betrayal of my grandfather's legacy, of the girl who'd sketched houses in his office, dreaming of leading the company one day. The hardest part was Mason. I loved him, despite the sting of his ambition. We'd grown up thick as thieves, sharing secrets under the oak tree in our backyard, sneaking cookies from Mom's jar, laughing until our sides ached. He wasn't cruel, just entitled, raised to believe the world would bend to his charm. I sat on my couch, my phone in hand, staring at his contact photo, a goofy selfie from his last visit, his hair windswept from a hike. I could call him, demand to know why he'd accepted the role, beg him to step aside. But I knew his response. He'd flash that boyish grin, shrug, and say, "They chose me, Lauren." What was I supposed to do? It would break my heart all over again. I set the phone down and walked to my bookshelf, pulling out a faded photo album. Inside were pictures of my grandfather's first projects, a library, a school, a church, each one a testament to his vision. I traced his handwriting on a caption, "Build with purpose." Giving up wasn't an option. I'd fight, not for their approval, but for myself. I met Sarah for coffee the next day, needing her perspective. We sat in a cozy cafe, the air thick with the scent of espresso and cinnamon. "They've always favored Mason," she said, stirring her latte, her voice gentle but firm. "Even when we were kids, they'd let him get away with anything. But this? It's a slap in the face." Her words mirrored my own thoughts, giving me strength. I spent that night reviewing old company photos, images of me at job sites, hard hat tilted, clipboard in hand. Each one was a reminder of what I'd built, what they'd tried to take. By morning, my decision was ironclad. I wouldn't beg or run. I'd outshine them, building something that would stand taller than their betrayal. The turning point came a week later, when I requested a private lunch with Ellen Harper. We met at a sleek downtown bistro, its linen napkins and polished silverware a quiet nod to her success. Ellen was a force, silver hair in a chic bun, eyes that missed nothing. I'd built a relationship with her over 2 years, starting at that women's conference where we'd swapped stories of being underestimated in boardrooms. She'd trusted me to deliver the $12 million Harper development project, a mixed-use complex that would redefine Raleigh's skyline. As we sat, the hum of conversation around us, I laid out the truth. "My parents chose Mason as CEO," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "He's never managed a project. I'm starting my own firm, Caldwell Designs, and I want to take your contract with me." Ellen listened, her fork pausing over her salmon. "You wrote that oversight clause," she said, her tone thoughtful. "Smart move." I nodded, explaining my vision for Caldwell Designs: sustainable architecture, client-focused innovation, a team built on trust. I'd already leased a small office in Raleigh's warehouse district, filed incorporation papers, and secured a modest loan. But I needed a flagship client to launch. "Your project is my best work," I told her. "If you stay with Caldwell Construction, Mason will take over." "He's not ready." Ellen didn't commit immediately, but her questions, about my team, my timeline, my commitment to eco-friendly materials, were sharp, engaged. Over coffee, she shared her own story of being overlooked early in her career, her voice tinged with empathy. "Send me a proposal," she said, shaking my hand as we parted. "I'll talk to my board." I left the bistro, the autumn air crisp against my skin, a spark of hope igniting. This wasn't just about reclaiming the contract. It was about proving I could build something greater than the legacy they tried to steal. I met with a lawyer, Rachel Kim, to ensure my new firm was protected. "You're within your rights to take clients who choose you," she said, reviewing the Harper contract. "That clause is ironclad. But be prepared, your family won't take this lightly." I nodded, ready for the fight. I spent that evening drafting the proposal, my dining room glowing with lamplight, my fingers flying over the keyboard. Each word was a declaration of independence, a promise to myself and my grandfather's memory. My secret plans unfolded over the next month with the precision of a well-executed blueprint. I worked late into the night, my living room a maze of papers and coffee mugs, as I built Caldwell Designs from the ground up. I designed a sleek website, showcasing my portfolio, projects I'd led, from community centers to office towers, each one a testament to my skill. I contacted key clients, framing my departure as a new chapter, rather than a rebellion. I met with suppliers, like Tom Grayson, a gruff lumber vendor I'd worked with for years. "Mason's been calling," he said over coffee, his brow furrowed. "Told me to cut costs by switching to cheaper materials. I told him to talk to you." I smiled, thanking him for his loyalty. "I'm starting my own firm," I said. "You in?" He grinned. "Always, Lauren." the biggest challenge was my team. I'd mentored 6 architects and engineers, each one integral to Caldwell Construction's success. I met them individually, in quiet cafes or park benches, to avoid suspicion. Javier, my lead engineer, was the first. We sat in a diner, the clink of plates in the background, as I shared my vision. Caldwell Designs will focus on sustainability, I said. I want you as my second in command. His eyes lit up. You're the reason I stayed, Lauren. I'm in. One by one, the others followed: Amelia, the structural genius; Marcus, the budget wizard; Priya, the design innovator; and Carlos, the site manager. Only one stayed, loyal to my father. I respected their choice, but my team was set, their expertise and trust a foundation stronger than any I'd had at Caldwell Construction. I hired a new architect, Lena, a recent grad with a passion for green design, her enthusiasm infectious as we brainstormed in my makeshift office, a rented loft with exposed brick and creaky floors. I kept my plans hidden, attending Caldwell Construction meetings with a neutral smile, nodding as Mason pitched half-baked ideas about modernizing, with neon signage or cutting our best suppliers. Dad clapped him on the back, oblivious to the staff's unease, their glances flickering to me for reassurance. I gave none, my resignation letter locked in a drawer at home, waiting for the right moment. Each meeting was a performance, my silence a shield as I built my future in secret. The aftermath began the morning I resigned. I walked into my father's office, the familiar smell of leather and wood polish grounding me as I handed him the letter. My hands were steady, my navy blazer crisp against my white blouse. I'm leaving, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. Dad's face fell, his gray eyes wide with shock. Leaving? Lauren, you're the heart of this place. The irony stung, but I held his gaze. You made it clear I'm not. You chose Mason. Mom, sorting files in the corner, gasped, her pearl earrings glinting as she stepped forward. This is about the CEO role. Sweetheart, we thought you'd understand. Mason needed the opportunity. Her voice was soft, pleading, but it only fueled my resolve. It's not about understanding, I said. It's about respect. I built this company, and you gave it to someone who doesn't know a blueprint from a napkin. Mason walked in, his button-down rumpled, catching the end of my words. Lauren, come on, he said, his voice soft, that grin I'd once loved now infuriating. We're a team. You don't have to leave. I turned to him, my eyes cold. I'm not leaving the industry, Mason. I'm starting my own firm. The room went silent. Dad's jaw tightened, Mom's hand froze on her files, and Mason's grin vanished. Your own firm, he said, his tone a mix of disbelief and condescension. Good luck, I said, my voice sharp as I turned to leave. You're going to need it. I walked out, my heels clicking on the hardwood, the weight of their stares heavy but powerless against my resolve. The consequences were swift and brutal. That afternoon, I sent a formal proposal to Harper Development, detailing why Caldwell Designs was the better choice for their $12 million project. Ellen called the next day, her voice warm but decisive. The board's in. We're moving the contract to you. It was a lifeline, a validation of everything I'd built. I notified other clients, meeting them in quiet offices or over Zoom, my pitch rooted in trust and results. 3 more followed, a hospital expansion, a retail plaza, and a school renovation, citing my expertise and their unease with Mason's inexperience. My team resigned one by one, their letters polite but firm, each citing new opportunities. Javier's was the last, his handshake firm as he joined me at Caldwell Designs. By the end of the week, Caldwell Construction was in chaos, their flagship project gone, their top staff decimated, and their reputation crumbling. My parents fought back, their desperation palpable. Dad called, his voice a mix of fury and fear. You're tearing this family apart, Lauren. How could you steal our clients? I stayed calm, my tone measured. I didn't steal them. They chose me, just like you chose Mason. Mom left voicemails, her voice trembling with guilt trips. We're your parents. We built this company for you and Mason. Can't we work this out? I didn't respond, letting their pleas fade into silence. Mason texted, his words a mix of bravado and unease. Didn't think you had it in you. Guess I underestimated you. I deleted it, my heart heavy but resolute. Aunts and uncles called, some outraged, others supportive. My Aunt Clara, a quiet woman who'd always admired my work, sent a long email. I'm ashamed of them, she wrote. You're doing what's right. Her words were a balm, a reminder that not all family was lost. Starting Caldwell Designs was a grind. Securing loans was a maze of paperwork and rejections, my small apartment cluttered with bank statements and business plans. I hired Lena, whose green designs added a spark to our portfolio, and we worked from a rented loft, its creaky floors and drafty windows a far cry from Caldwell Construction's sleek office. There were nights I doubted myself, lying awake as the clock ticked past midnight, the weight of my decision pressing down. Had I been too rash? Could I really compete with my family's legacy? But my team kept me grounded. Javier brought coffee to our morning huddles, his dry humor cutting through the stress. Sarah, my cousin, became our first client, hiring us to design her bakery, its pastel facade a nod to her love of sweets. Each contract, each sketch, was a step towards something new. Caldwell Construction faltered under Mason's leadership. His inexperience was glaring, missed deadlines, botched budgets, and a public dispute with a supplier made headlines in the Raleigh News and Observer. A community center project collapsed when Mason ignored zoning laws, costing the company a $2 million penalty. Clients continued to defect, their trust in the Caldwell name eroded by his missteps. The board, once loyal to my father, grew restless, pressuring him to reconsider Mason's role. Industry gossip reached me through Tom, the supplier. They're hemorrhaging money, he said over lunch, shaking his head. Your dad's talking about stepping in himself, but it's too late. I didn't gloat. Their downfall was their own, a mirror of the choices they'd made. My parents reached out, their tone shifting from anger to desperation. Dad called, his voice quieter, almost broken. We made a mistake, Lauren. Can we talk? I agreed to meet, but on my terms, choosing a neutral cafe with exposed brick walls and the hum of espresso machines. They looked older, their confidence worn thin. Mason wasn't there, he'd left for another sabbatical, unable to handle the pressure, retreating to some beach in Greece. We didn't realize how much you did, Mom admitted, her hands wrapped around a latte, her nails unpainted for the first time I could remember. We thought Mason could learn, that you'd stay and guide him. I leaned back, my voice steady. You didn't ask me to guide him. You replaced me. Dad nodded, his eyes fixed on his coffee. We were wrong. What can we do to fix this? I didn't answer immediately. Part of me wanted to forgive them, to rebuild the family I'd once believed in, to sit at their dining room table and laugh like we used to. But I'd spent too long chasing their approval, only to be cast aside. You can't fix it, I said, my voice gentle but firm. But you can respect my choice. Caldwell Designs is my legacy now. They didn't argue, their silence a concession. As I left, the cafe's warmth fading into the cool evening, I felt a weight lift, not forgiveness, but closure. I'd freed myself from their expectations, their legacy no longer my cage. 6 months later, Caldwell Designs was a rising star. We'd secured 5 major contracts, including a sustainable housing project that landed us a feature in a national architecture magazine, the glossy pages praising our innovative vision. My team had grown to 10, our office a buzzing hive of creativity, whiteboards covered in sketches, laughter echoing during late-night brainstorming sessions. I'd started mentoring young architects, women like me who'd been told they didn't belong in the room. Lena's designs won a local award, and I beamed as she accepted it, her speech thanking me for giving her a chance. I spoke at a women's business conference, sharing my story of resilience, the audience's applause a validation I no longer needed from my parents. Caldwell Construction survived, but it was a shadow of its former self, relegated to small renovations while Mason floundered in a junior role, his charm no match for the industry's demands. My parents stepped back, their influence diminished, their social circle whispering about their misstep. I stood on the balcony of my new office one evening, the Raleigh skyline glittering below, a glass of wine in my hand. I thought of my grandfather, his calloused hands and quiet faith in me, and the dinner that had tried to erase me. They'd raised their glasses to Mason, believing they'd written my story. But I'd taken the pen, crafting a legacy that outshined theirs in every way. What do you do when the people you love choose someone else over you? You build something brighter, stronger, and you never look back.